Hey guys, it's Miss Edwards for library. I know it's been a long time since we've had a library posting, and I had a little bit of technical difficulty. I had done a lot of recordings for library in advance, and somehow they got deleted from my OneDrive. So I hadn't found the time to go back and re-record them until now. So we're going to pick up with Swipe, and we are on chapter 4. We're going to listen to a good bit because I covered a lot in those recordings that were deleted. So to make up time, we're going to listen to a good chunk of the story. If this is your first time viewing this story, if you scroll back up through the specials channel, you can find all the previous library postings to get the first couple of chapters. So I've been using this epicbooks.com for our audiobook, and I really enjoy it. It's a nice website. I can create classes as an educator. So if you would be interested in me adding you to the class so you can look at what books they have on here, that's fine. They don't just have audiobooks. They have other regular books too. So if I would exit out of here, I can see my favorites. These are books I'm reading with you guys and some other classes. But I can go to my library, and I don't have anything in there right now, but if I wanted to look up searches, let's do Christmas. It gives me a wide variety of books for different age ranges. So this is for 10 and up, so you guys would classify as that. It tells me the reading level, brief synopsis, and the title and the author. Some of them have quizzes that I could assign if I made a site for you guys. So anyway, just showing you that. And let's get down to business.
Logan, you know.
Oh. I have to pick the right sound so that I can share it with you guys. All right, so let's listen.
Already finished 4 full sweeps of his house. He had already.
Oh, I'm having a slight technical difficulty because I am screen sharing with my smartboard. So let me stop screen sharing. Okay, now I'm going to start it over at the beginning. Okay?
2. By the time Dane called that night, Logan had already finished 4 full sweeps of his house. He had already checked all the locks twice. He had already determined his bedroom unfit for sitting, and he was already sandwiched safely between his parents on the living room couch, providing the calm company Logan needed while he distracted himself with pledge prep. Dad watched the television frame on low volume, and Mom sat upright, though she might have been asleep. Meanwhile, Logan curled up nose deep in his tablet computer, skimming Pedia articles on the Unity for the 100th time, and by now practically memorizing their words. He'd just finished reading twice the 5-part article about history leading up to the Total War, and he could have recited by heart the precise ways that rising temperatures had led to extinctions, crop failure, famine, how hurricanes and earthquakes and floods had forced relocation, had strained infrastructure and refugees and changed ecosystems for good, how countrymen had fought over land and water. He could have explained the migration of mosquitoes and other pests to the northern regions, the specific path each disease took across continents. He could have listed by name the spokesmen and leaders in those first waves of unrest, quoted the speeches and rallies and television programs that had prompted men and women to violence. He could have spouted off without blinking an eye the specific body counts of various battles and epidemics, the total dead and missing persons adding up to a staggering amount. For political history, he'd reviewed the ways in which the States' war differed subtly from the European War, and he studied the ways in which the two fit together to become simply the total war. He'd read about the meteoric rise of Chancellor Silas in Europe and the successful military trajectory of General Lamson in America. He'd memorized the ways in which each leader cooperated increasingly over the years, how Lamson had come to implement Silas's MARC program across the AU, how both had brought about the worldwide religious inclusion, all to ensure that nothing as cataclysmic as the total war ever happened again. The inclusion was of particular interest to Logan, partly because it was so far-reaching, and partly because it was the least talked about of all the major historical events. Logan knew from piecing together what he'd read that there had been a time not long ago when people around the world practiced a variety of different religions, each with its own system of values and culture and beliefs. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism. The idea of it fascinated Logan, even though he hadn't the slightest idea what those religions taught. After Lamson and Silas instituted the inclusion, everything that might once have been considered spiritual was just sort of lumped into a single bland system that mostly preached patriotism and peace. Not bad ideas by any means, and yet Logan couldn't help but wonder if somehow, in all of it, something important was being lost. In any case, this brought Logan to present-day news, to articles about the treaty and the speculation over the global union, along with editorials enthusiastically describing what a milestone it would be. Logan tried to imagine it as he continued to study. Any question was fair game in the oral exam at the pledge, and after the incalculable tragedy of his sister, Logan was simply doing everything he could to stack the deck in favor of him leaving that center alive. So by the time Dane called that night, facts upon facts upon facts all swam in Logan's head with such intensity that he began to lose track of where one ended and another began. And when his tablet buzzed with the incoming message, Logan accepted the distraction eagerly. "You up for hanging out?" Dane asked. "I'm done with homework, and we've got another hour of daylight." "I need to study. I'm terrified of this pledge," Logan admitted. "Oh, please. You're gonna ace that stupid thing. Besides, your birthday's not for months. And it's the first week of the school year. We're practically obligated to cause some trouble tonight." Logan smiled. "That sounds good," he said. "I'll see what my parents think." 3. It had been several hours since Mr. Arbiter had messaged to say it'd be another late night, and presently Erin sat on the floor of her apartment among no fewer than 5 empty dome boxes, 3 of which had come from the Spokey office just the night before, brought home by her father and hidden deep in his bedroom closet under the irresistible label, Supply Room 113B. Their contents were ripe: a small roll of clear tape, an ounce of chalk dust, gel, pellets, sticky bean-like things, a button. Erin stared at the pile with reverence, as she might a loaded gun or a rattlesnake. She knew what very little of the equipment was, and she knew even less about how to use any of it. But she was determined not to let that get in her way. She'd already looked again through her father's confidential papers, and she'd caught plenty she missed the first time around about the particular threat Spokey faced, about who this Peck might be, about the spy games he employed, and about the crimes he'd committed in this quiet Corn Belt town over the last few years. She'd certainly caught enough to know that she needed a tactical advantage for her mission not to be suicide. The details of the case were horrifying, and it was little wonder why they'd brought in the big gun Beacon talent to handle it. Erin rolled up her sleeves. From his hiding spot under the couch, her iguana scampered over to see what all the intrigue was. "You want to help, little buddy?" She picked Iggy up, and he looked at her cockeyed, paddling his claws in the air like he was swimming. His tail swished back and forth, and he stuck his tongue out in a short, funny rhythm. Erin laughed. She decided to take this as a yes. 4. There was a rule in the Langley house about throwing anything upstairs in the yard on the roof. The rule was, don't throw anything upstairs in the yard on the roof. But Dane had brought over a hover disc, and he had long ago convinced Logan that actually, if the Langleys had thought about it, the rule they'd really meant to lay down was, don't throw anything off the yard on the roof, and don't fall off yourself when trying to catch it. So the two of them stood up there now, watching the sun lower into the evening parts of the sky and tossing the disc back and forth on its lowest fake-out setting. "You're liking the new girl?" Dane said after a bit of small talk. His throw zigzagged back to Logan. "What, makes you say—" Logan lunged for the catch and didn't finish his thought. "You should introduce me sometime. She seems cool." "Sure," Logan said. His voice cracked over the word. "How was New Chicago anyway?" "Boring," Dane said, but he missed his catch, and the two of them watched wide-eyed as the hover disc floated over the roof's edge and out of sight. "You broke our own rule," Logan said. Dane looked down over the railing and shook his head. "To the letter of it, yes. But I'm pretty sure the spirit of that rule is actually, don't hit anybody on the street with anything you throw over the side, and don't break any neighbors' windows." He smiled. "We're blameless." So the two of them set about retrieving Dane's hover disc from the tree on the opposite sidewalk. Guilt-free, but with every intention of finishing the job before Logan's mom and dad saw. They were halfway down the outdoor spiraling staircase when Dane stopped for a moment just outside Logan's room. "Hey, I meant to ask you," Dane said. "What's this fishing line for?" Logan turned around, confused. "I saw it on the way in but forgot to mention it." Dane reached out over the stairwell, on his toes with his arm fully extended, and plucked the twine like a guitar string. It made a low and eerie twang that rang all the way across the street. "I've never noticed it," Logan said. He stepped back to have a look. The line was clear and invisible unless the sun caught it just right. It was attached to the corner window of Logan's room, a window that didn't open, with a small dollop of clear superglue, and it extended, taut, into the distance, to some unidentifiable point. Beyond a few feet out, nothing could be seen of the thing, and it was unlikely anyone could spot it by looking through the bedroom window, or by using the stairs in any normal way. "How'd you see it?" Dane shrugged. "Just caught my eye on the way in. The light hit it funny. I figured it was some sort of experiment you had going or something. Like a zip line for ants." Dane laughed at himself. "Is it a zip line for ants?" "No," Logan said, hyperventilating a little. "Weird," Dane shrugged. "Come on, let's go get the hover disc. We'll rock tablet laser to see who has to climb the tree." 5. On weekends growing up, Erin would spend Saturdays shadowing her mother in the offices on Barrier Street in Beacon. For a household run by two busy parents, it was either that or playdates, and as soon as she was old enough to say so, Erin admitted that she much preferred the office. The trading floors, of course, were the most exciting thing on Barrier Street. Long cavernous rooms filled with thousands of tablet computers attached to women and men by brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. With markets fluctuating as fast as they did, the time it took for keystrokes or hand gestures or words was unacceptable. These days, stocks rose and fell with brain waves. But Erin never stayed long on the trading floor. Her mom was not a part of that particular frenzy. Her mom was above it. So Erin would spend her days in the corner of a small windowless office, its wall screens decorated with economic charts and program algorithms, and with the occasional electronic drawing made by Erin. It wasn't long before Dr. Arbiter recognized that Erin needed stimulation, so she'd soon set her daughter up with a computer and her own BCI. At first, Erin wasn't much interested in the tablet her mother had given her. Its preloaded games were too easy and bored her quickly, and its movies were bland. But a few weekends in, Erin's mother took a minute between EU calls to show her daughter that the tablet she'd been given was more than just a tool for consuming. It was a tool for creating. Under the surface, it was a blank slate, one that could be manipulated, programmed, hacked. And a month later, when Dr. Arbiter noticed her daughter delving into source code on her own, she thought it might be time to send Erin to her friend Mac down the hall. Mac was a computer whiz employed by Dome. Mac could sign on to the tablet at his desk in Beacon and orchestrate an electrobus jam 5 minutes later in Sierra. Mac could do anything, and he soon took a liking to Erin. Erin was bright and curious, and more than a little mischievous. So Mac began teaching hacking tricks to Erin while her mom fooled herself into thinking she'd found a good babysitter for her daughter. Mac giggled endlessly the time he showed Erin how to make all the lights on the trading floor go out, and again the time he taught her how to tap into the building's security system and set off the fire alarms. One Valentine's Day, a few years in, he even showed Erin how to stream I Got You Babe over the loudspeakers for a full minute and a half before the building's mainframe immune system kicked in and booted Erin's tablet from the network permanently. Dr. Arbiter didn't let Erin see Mac after that, but it wasn't long before Erin figured out how to hack into Mac's operating space, and over the next few years, he taught her the rest of what he could by IP chat and text message. Now, in her lonely Spokane apartment, Erin sat with her computer and was finally putting these skills to good use. Through trial and error, she'd hacked her tablet into communicating with the Dome technology spread across her apartment floor. And to her programmer's eye, the data it transmitted, in machine code and assembly language, painted a picture of how each object might be used. The chalk dust, it turned out, wasn't chalk at all, but surveillance powder capable of absorbing sound and translating it to radio frequency, which the accompanying gel picked up live, like a one-way walkie-talkie. The tape worked similarly, but had proven more useful for recording than for live communication. The sticky beans would short out when squeezed, turning into a strange taser-like defense. The button was a tracker, and on, each item coming together to give its user a powerful set of advantages. Erin surveyed the inventory, no longer feeling like an amateur. But suddenly, a scream let out deep inside her ears, and Erin clutched at her head in shock and pain. It was the gel. At the start of her experimentation, she'd put the radio gel in her ears, along with a generous dose of surveillance powder on her iguana, and she set the lizard loose in her apartment building to see if the gel would pick up any outside conversations. Until now, she'd heard nothing, and truthfully, in her excitement over the rest of the equipment, she'd forgotten all about her little audio test. But the screaming continued in her ears, howling and tiny, a voice shouting, "It's a monster! Someone kill it!" And while Erin was happy to know that the powder gel combination she'd tested was working, she was now faced with the more urgent task of tracking down an illegal pet iguana that had clearly just escaped into the unforgiving streets of Spokane. 6. Across town, Logan and Dane's old friend Haley Phoenix put dinner in front of her mother and sat down at the table to eat. Tonight, they were having lentils and cabbage. Haley's mother, Mrs. Phoenix, worked long and grueling hours on the floor of the nanomaterials plant out of town. Her commute by electrobus was an hour and a half each way, so she would leave at 4:30 each morning and she would return home at 6 o'clock each night. This was her routine 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. When she did come home, Mrs. Phoenix would invariably spend her first 30 minutes or so in the bathroom upstairs, coughing violently and murmuring things about all that nano dust. Would usually give Haley enough time to prepare dinner, since their dinners were never elaborate. It had not always been this way. Just 3 years ago, Mrs. Phoenix was still an unmarked stay-at-home mother, and Mr. Phoenix worked as head manager over the plant. They'd never had much money, but they'd had enough, and they enjoyed the quiet life Haley's father had always supported. Then, in Haley's 6th grade year, Mr. Phoenix died of a heart attack, brought on, the doctor said, by the drinking habit he'd never quite been able to outsmart since his time serving in the state's war. Ironically, his autopsy confirmed that it was in fact the nano enhancements in his favorite drink, manufactured at the very same plant Mr. Phoenix managed, that finally did him in. But neither Mrs. Phoenix nor Haley ever saw the humor in this. And when they'd called in every last favor they could from friends across Spokane, when the food and everything else simply ran out, Mrs. Phoenix had no choice but to receive the mark and beg her way into a pity hire at the lowest levels of work the nanomaterials plant had to offer. "How's school this year?" Haley's mother asked. "The same. We're doing holograms and art." "That's great," Mrs. Phoenix said. "You've got to be the best in the class." Haley smiled. "I am, I think." Outside of schoolwork, Haley had taken up 2 hobbies since her father passed away. The first was a habit of long nighttime walks outside of town. Haley liked the countryside feeling of the cornfields and spars woods, and she often imagined herself living deep in the no man's land between the Union's great cities. Haley had no idea how this would ever be possible. She hadn't even the means to travel to New Chicago, let alone the faraway flatlands. And anyway, she had her mother to worry about. But she allowed herself the fantasy all the same. The second thing Haley had taken up was sculpture. Every chance her mother got, she would bring home machine scraps and discarded equipment from the plant. And Haley would spend her free time turning it into art, which her mother kept around the house or displayed proudly on the front steps. This odd hobby began after Mrs. Phoenix noticed what great things Haley was making with all the garbage she'd found on the street. There was a lot of garbage on Haley's street, and before long, Haley got the impression that her mother entertained wild dreams of Haley Phoenix becoming the great modern artist of Spokane. This was even more ridiculous than her own plans to move out to the flatlands, Haley thought. But at the same time, she had to admit that it was kind of nice. "Holograms," Mrs. Phoenix said. "Imagine that." 7. After she'd washed the dishes and bid her mother good night, Haley slipped out of the house, as she always did, to take her nightly stroll. The sun was sitting low in the sky at this point, and since Haley's block was as close to any inhabited street got to Slog Row, there was more than a few markless roaming the sidewalk. But Haley didn't mind the markless the way most people did, partly because her mother had been one until recently, and partly because, living where she did, Haley just saw so many of them. Sure, her house was robbed, every couple of months, in fact. And yes, Haley had been accosted while coming home late one night just a few weeks ago. But since there wasn't any paper money left for anyone to steal, and since Haley and her mother had so little besides lintels and garbage sculptures laying around the house anyway, Haley figured that she just didn't have all that much left to lose. Even so, Haley wasn't much interested tonight in crossing the expressway to explore Spokane's dark outskirts, and she soon found herself ambling the other direction, toward the fancy center square downtown, thinking happily that it would be a rather nice night for window shopping. She was almost there when Haley ran into a fellow 8th grade student looking lost and flustered, and a little frightened just outside Spokey Central Park. "You okay?" Haley asked. "Need any help?" "I lost my iguana," the girl said. "You're from school, right?" Haley said that she was. "It's all right, though. He's wearing a tracker. I can follow him on my tablet. See?" The girl showed Haley her tablet and pointed to the satellite picture on the little glowing dot moving around inside the park beside them. "I'm Haley." "Oh, Aaron, hi." Aaron began walking in the direction of the dot on her map. "What are you doing with an iguana?" Haley asked. "And why is it wearing a tracker?" "Not just a tracker," Aaron said distractedly. "He's got some powder on him, too. Wait." Aaron cocked her head and listened for a moment. Haley heard nothing. "He's running by water. Is there a fountain in this park?" "You're new here, aren't you?" Haley said. "Yes, from Beacon." "They let you take iguanas for walks in Beacon?" "I didn't take him for a walk. He escaped. Or, well, I sort of let him out into the hallway, but I didn't think... Look, it doesn't matter. And no, Beacon doesn't. Oh, forget it," Aaron said. "Come on," Haley told her, laughing a little. "I'll take you to the fountain." 8. Back on Logan Street, Logan and Dane were trying to beat the sunset and retrieve Dane's hover disk before it got too dark, but its perch in the tree was awfully high. "I don't know why I'm the one up here," Logan said as Dane laughed sympathetically from the sidewalk. "You're the one who missed the catch." "Yeah, 'cause your throw was off." "It's a hover disk. It's supposed to veer off. It was on the lowest setting." "Whatever," Logan said. He was standing on the highest branch that could possibly have supported him, 10 or so feet off the ground, and strained to touch the sports disc just out of reach. "Anyway, you lost Rock Tablet Laser." "Did not," Logan said. "Who ever heard of a Rock Tablet Laser match where you don't play best 2 out of 3? He wasn't actually angry, but the banter took his mind off his precarious foothold. "Well, when you get back down here, we can have a rematch." Dane laughed. "Great, thanks," Logan said, but his own laughter stopped short. "What's up? You knock it loose?" Logan hadn't knocked it loose. Logan hadn't touched the hover disk at all. Instead, in the fast approaching darkness of night, he'd stumbled upon something else high up in the tree. A can, a tin can, like the kind you'd find tomato soup in, or beans. It was hanging off a twig above him. It was hanging from fish line. Logan unwrapped the line from the tree and pulled the can to his ear. The clear twine traveled off across the street toward Logan's house and pulled tight against him. "Honey, do you know where the boys went?" said a distant voice in the tin can. "They're on the roof." "They aren't, though. Wait a second. I see Dane outside." Logan looked on in horror as his dad stepped out onto the stairwell outside Logan's room. "Dane," he called from across the street. "Do you know where Logan went?" Dane flashed a glance to Logan in the tree and immediately thought better of admitting it. "We're, racing, Mr. Langley. We took a lap around the block. He's still catching up." "Well, you boys come in when you're done. Dinner soon. You're welcome to join if you'd like." "Thanks, Mr. Langley," Dane yelled. "I'll think about it." Mr. Langley stepped back inside Logan's room, and in the tin can he held to his ear, Logan could hear his father's voice say, "Boy's growing up faster than I know what to do with him." Logan's hands shook almost too much for him to hold on to the tree. In one clumsy motion, he knocked the hover disk from its branch and tore the tin can from its fishing line. "You got it," Dane whispered. trying to be cautious after lying to Logan's dad. "Good job." Logan climbed to a safe height and jumped the rest of the way down the tree and onto the sidewalk. "What have you got there?" Dane asked. Logan was holding the can. "You okay, dude? You look like you're gonna faint." Logan felt that way too, weak in his knees. He had to sit down. Dane put his hand on Logan's shoulder and said, "Look, it was a close call with your dad, but it wasn't that close. He's not even angry." Logan was grateful for the alibi, as the last thing he wanted to do right now was explain to Dane what he'd just found. "You're right," he said. "I'm just being stupid." At that moment, two girls appeared together down the sidewalk. When they came a little closer, Logan could see that they were in fact Haley and Aaron. Aaron was holding her iguana tightly in both hands and speaking loudly and excitedly to Haley, though she wasn't yet close enough for Logan to hear the words. "Yo, girls," Dane called out. "Hey, over here." Haley turned and smiled upon seeing Dan and Logan. Aaron smiled too. "What's up?" Dane asked when they'd come a little closer. "Just out for a stroll," Haley said. "I lost my iguana." Aaron held him up. Dane cleared his throat, and Logan snapped out of his daze. "Oh, Dane, this is Aaron," he said. "Aaron, this is my friend Dane." Dane nodded approvingly at Logan and waved to Aaron. "Hi," Aaron said. Logan managed a thin smile. "I didn't know you two knew each other." "We just met," Haley said. Aaron laughed. "Playing kick the can, I see." She gestured with Iggy to the can Logan was holding. "Yeah, what is that?" Dane asked Logan. "It's nothing," Logan lied. Dane pointed up. "You find it in the tree?" Dude, it was probably a bird's nest or something, and you stole it." "Shut up, Dane," Logan said, rolling his eyes. "It wasn't a bird's nest." He hesitated. "Actually, it was attached to that twine you found." Dane frowned. "Why?" It was picking up sounds in my room." Logan felt himself go white as he said it. "So you did have an experiment going," Dane said. Logan laughed distantly. "Yeah," he chuckled. "Works better than you'd think." But right as he lied, Aaron caught Logan's eye. She read the look on his face, and suddenly many pieces of some grand puzzle clicked into place. Could it be? Could Logan really be Peck's next victim? Could this be what all the haunting stories had been about last night? Could that be the explanation behind this tin can too? Aaron's eyes went wide. Without thinking, she hoisted Iggy up onto her shoulder and steadied him with one hand. With her other, she took Logan's, her touch surging through him. "Listen," she said. "There's something I need to show you." And the two of them turned. "Dude, where are you going?" Dane looked at Logan pleadingly, stealing a short glance at Haley. "I thought we were going to eat dinner or something." "Dinner can wait," Aaron said. "No, it can't," Dane said. "Logan, not cool." But Logan was already gone, dragging wildly behind Aaron as she pulled him down the road. "Peck," Aaron whispered once they'd run some feet away. "What are you talking about?" Logan said. "What's going on? Who's Peck?" "I think you're lying about the tin can being yours. But I think everything else you've said to me has been the truth." Logan was starting to breathe heavily. "You're right, but Aaron, what is this about? Who's Peck? Where have I heard that name before?" Back by the tree, Dane looked at Haley. She smiled apologetically. "So," Dane said. "Hi," Haley said. The two of them shrugged, and they made their way home. 9. Erin shuffled through boxes in her father's closet, fielding Logan's frantic questions. He what? Killed someone. Guy named John Pullman? John was 15 at the time. Why? Logan felt a shudder run down his back. No one knows. Peck had a history with him. They'd been friends for years, apparently. John had the mark. Some speculate Peck couldn't tolerate it any longer. Peck doesn't have the mark? That's right. And he killed his own friend because his friend did? That doesn't make any sense. No, but consistent if you keep digging. Erin found the box labeled Dome Confidential, which she'd hidden before she left, and exhumed it once more. Something about the mark seemed to rub Peck the wrong way. Big time. Turns out he attacked another one of his oldest friends, Trenton, just 6 months later. Trenton was 17. He's been in a coma ever since. Now Erin corroborated her story with pages that she took out from her father's box one at a time. How long's that been now? About 4 months. Hasn't woken up. Logan looked over the papers. What'd Peck do to him? Same thing he did to John. Blunt object to the back of the head. Over the mark? Erin could tell Logan was skeptical. You wouldn't think so necessarily, not from those 2 instances alone. But the story continues. Logan had to concentrate hard on his breathing to keep from hyperventilating. He could already see his peripheral vision fading. Erin continued. See, a Dome agent was at the scene the time Peck went after Trenton. Tried to stop Peck in the act. That's why Peck couldn't finish the job. But Peck didn't run. Not right away. Went after the Dome agent first. Hit him with a chair. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not. No one attacks a Dome agent. You have to be... That's right, Erin said. You'd have to be crazy. Logan sank to his knees beside Erin, not quite able to stand as the gravity of all this crept up on him. But why would a Dome agent have been there? Police, I'd understand. Someone calls a disturbance, an officer shows up. But a Dome agent? Dome doesn't ever handle crimes not related to the mark. Exactly. Erin paused so the conclusions could sink in. But it still doesn't make sense. Why go after his own friends? Who knows? The guy's markless. He's a criminal. Logan shook his head. It isn't a crime to be markless, no matter what age you are. It's not, no, not in itself. But to survive like that, no way to eat, nowhere to stay, it'd make a criminal out of you pretty quick. Logan thought of Slog Row. I guess it would. But you're right, Erin admitted. All this by itself is still weird. Why his friends? Why a Dome agent? Right. She handed him another page. Well, turns out the Dome agent wasn't killed, just banged up a bit. Couple months ago, he was able to testify. Okay. Apparently, he'd had his eye on Peck for some time. They still don't know much about him, or his history, at least according to these papers. They don't even know his full name, but they know what he's been up to recently. And the incidents with Peck's friends, those are the exceptions. Mostly, Peck doesn't kill, and mostly, Peck doesn't target those with the mark. Logan had a feeling he didn't want to hear the rest of this, but he couldn't help himself from asking. Then what does he do mostly? Mostly, he targets kids. Logan shuddered. Kids? What for? All Dome knows is, in the past 3 or 4 years, Peck's had a history of tracking kids while they're preparing for the pledge. Some of them, he tracks them, then he seems to let them go, forgets about them, lets them just get the mark and live their lives. Many never even realize they've been watched. And others? Erin looked Logan in the eyes. She put a hand on his shoulder. The others disappear. Logan couldn't believe what he was hearing. What do you mean they disappear? About 2 months ago, Peck kidnapped a girl named Meg Stewart. Meg was 12 at the time, your age. Would have been 13 by now, and marked, of course, but no sign of her. How do they know it was him? He left a note, on paper, asking Meg to meet him at some playground. Apparently, she followed the instructions. Why would she have done that? Beats me. She took half the note with her, and the part that remained was charred, like it'd been burned up. Dome could only make out part of it, but the rest must have made a pretty compelling argument. Anyway, that was the last anyone saw of her. Did Peck kill her too? Hard to say. They haven't found a body. Logan cursed under his breath. According to these documents, Dome's pretty convinced Peck's done this a few times. They've found burn notes in the past, but this is the first with any traceable evidence on it. Coupled with the Dome agent's testimony, it's launched the full-scale investigation that brought my dad here. Logan swallowed. And you think I'm next? Erin frowned, scanning the papers she and Logan had strewn about the floor. I don't know, she said. Not if we find him first.
Okay, so we listened to a lot of that. I thought that we could finish chapter 4, but like chapter 3, it has just so many parts. So we're going to finish for today, and then next week I'm going to post some more. And I won't post as many chapters next time, but like I said, I was just trying to get caught up from all of the download files that I had that got deleted. So I will be posting the rest of chapter 4 next week. So it was great to see you. Make sure you're also completing your computer lessons. I took over for the month of December again. It's my turn, so I've been posting some things. So make sure you like or you comment on those.